It's the summer of 1983 in Chihuahua State, Mexico, just an hour or two from the border of Texas. And there's a cartel war that's been raging in the scrublands and canyons that dot the area, one of the most vicious that the region has ever seen at that point. And Pablo Acosta, otherwise known as the Ojinaga Fox, has had enough. He's gone with some of his goons to stake out the 12,000-acre ranch of Fermin Arevalo, another top trafficker in the area that he's been warring with for years. Pablo and Fermin actually met in jail in the mid-70s when both were locked up on drug trafficking charges and became fast friends. Pablo was pretty small time then, and Fermin helped him out, getting a lawyer, getting him money, and getting him released. Fermin had his own thing going. He lived a fascinating life. He was a rodeo star, a bank robber, and a cattle rustler well before becoming a drug trafficker. He's famous in the area, rough, a real border outlaw cowboy who had good connections with all the growers in Sinaloa. He also had his two sons helping him. When he meets Pablo in jail, he's serving 3 years after getting raided, but he manages to run things even while he's locked up, and his sons help out on the outside. Thanks to him helping Pablo out, the families actually get really close. But friendships never last in the narco world. In the ensuing years, Pablo ends up becoming the top dog in Ojinaga, the boss of the plaza. And Fermin, him and his two sons, they don't like that at all. Tensions rise. And then Pablo loses a major cross-border weed shipment in the States after the police are tipped off, and then starts losing internal flights to Mexican authorities. He starts to get suspicious, starts to think one of Fermin's sons is selling him out. And finally, one of the sons actually rips Pablo off on a deal. Soon enough, some of Pablo's men come across both the Fermin sons and there's a shootout. One son is killed and the other wounded, and the tensions break out into full-on war. Bodies drop left and right over the next 18 months. Finally, Pablo decides, okay, this is it. It's time for a handshake or a showdown, Wild West style. These guys really are cowboys, bandit outlaws. So he stakes out the ranch until he believes it's relatively empty, and then he approaches the house, only to be met by Fermin's wife, who begins a back and forth with him. She claims he's not home, that he left, and at one point, Pablo even hands his pistol to her and says she can shoot him if she thinks it'll bring her son back. It ends in a tense standoff, but Fermin isn't there. He actually had snuck out of the house. On Pablo's way back, him and his men are then ambushed by Fermin and his men. But Pablo manages to turn the tables on them, and Fermin and his men are both killed. Pablo and his goons then head back to the ranch house to grab Fermin's wife and her maid and take them both hostage, not knowing if there's going to be a second ambush. But there isn't. Then they actually bring the woman back to the scene of the shootout to show them her dead husband's body. Quote, "We opened him up like a goat," Pablo is said to have told her, after one of his men used a machete to desecrate the body. Shortly after, an arrest warrant is issued for him and his men, but he spends 200 million pesos, or about $1 million, to kill it off. Pablo is now untouchable. The war is over, and he is the undisputed boss of Ojinaga and 200 miles of the Texas border. And it's a good time for a burgeoning drug trafficker to be in charge of that border. Because something that's going to change everything is just about to start showing up there, in major quantities, coming straight off flights direct from Colombia. And Pablo's story, it isn't just about the evolution of a Mexican drug lord. It's about the drug trade itself, because Pablo is at his height at probably the biggest turning point in the drug war's history in Mexico, maybe even for the US. I don't know. And probably the biggest turning point for Mexico itself in the last 50-odd years. This is the Underworld Podcast. Welcome back to the Underworld Podcast, where we tell fascinating stories about international organized crime every single week in the hopes that people like you will listen to it. And then meal kit companies and shampoo startups will give us, significant amounts of money to then interrupt those stories and pitch their products to you, our brilliant listeners, in the hopes that you heed what we say about said products and buy them. And we are me, Danny Gold, and my co-host and hetero life mate, Sean Williams. We're both journalists who have reported on this stuff all over the world, and Sean pretty much still does. Where even are you right now?
No, I'm back in Wellington, mate. But yeah, I'm in between Saigon and Tokyo, where I'm going to be in a few days, which is going to be awesome. I even bought a gimbal and a lapel mic for my trip to Saigon, where our next show is coming from some crazy slum there. And I kind of lost my nerve. I realized that to be an influencer, you have to have such a massive ego to walk around with a gimbal and a phone talking to no one. So I just kind of filmed a bunch of stuff. But yeah, life is good. Life is very good. And I like to see you repping the Yankees as well. Shame about last night.
Fire Aaron Boone, dude. Fire. It's too much. Not happy. But yeah, we should get this going. Oh, you see the mug, dude? Classy hotel. You ever been there? It's like the one hotel that journalists stay at in northern Iraq and Erbil in the Christian neighborhood, where you can get hammered and eat giant steaks. It absolutely rules. Okay, here we go. As always, there are weekly bonus episodes at patreon.com/Underworld Podcast for $5 a month, or you can support us just $3 a month to help us keep this going. You can also sign up at Spotify or iTunes, underworldpod.com for merch, t-shirts and things like that. And email us at theunderworldpodcast@gmail.com for tips, complaints, compliments. Maybe you have a clothing company or sunglasses company and you want us to wear your stuff on the air. Send us free stuff. We will do it. Okay, are we good?
Oh yeah, I should mention there was a correction on that Epping Forest Murders episode that we did.
Yes.
I mentioned
embarrassing for you.
Very extremely bigly embarrassing. Yeah, I said that the Krays were running around London's underworld to the 90s. Actually, they'd been in prison since the late 60s. They were doing stuff from behind bars, of course, and they didn't die for a long time. But yeah, I don't know how that slipped through the net. I think I was too excited about conspiracy theories with the police. But yeah, well done for calling me out on it, guys. And please do send all your complaints directly to the podcast email, not my email, the podcast email.
If you were actually in Japan right now, which you're going to be in next week, I would make you cut off a segment of your pinky for bringing great shape on our name on the podcast for that.
Yeah, I've got very small fingers actually, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And I almost lost a finger once, but that's another story. But yeah, I am sorry. I will take the whip out and go and sit in the corner for a while and think about my actions.
All right. Pablo Acosta Villarreal, the OG drug lord. In fact, the book about him is actually called Drug Lord. It's by Terrence Papa, and it's the main source of pretty much this entire episode. It was written in 1990, so that can kind of tell you, before I think the Mexican cartel world was common knowledge to literally everyone. So that can kind of tell you, I think it might be the first real book of the cocaine cartel era. And I believe it's also, well, at least in Mexico, and I believe it's also the basis for a lot of season 1 and season 2 of Narcos Mexico. Though, of course, it's that whole thing is dramatized. There's a lot of fiction in it, even though it sticks to some reality. I'm rewatching it right now. It is fantastic. Of the book itself, Papa writes, it captures, quote, the key moment when flights of cocaine from Colombia entered the Mexican economy. And you can only imagine however significant he thought that moment was when he wrote this book. It's nothing compared to what it ended up being. Trafficker kingpins like Pablo Acosta, they're a product of their environment, and I don't just mean like the atmosphere they grew up around, the people and the social conditions. I mean their actual literal environment. And to understand that, you need to look at Ojinaga on a map. It's right there, just across the border of West Texas, south of Marfa, right inside or I think next to Big Bend National Park. So it's a border town, but on a much smaller scale than Juarez and surrounded by like scrubland and national park and in beautiful but harsh desert terrain. It's a major smuggling area for generations, and not just for like illicit drugs, right? But it does get big during Prohibition when soldiers stationed near Marfa, that's in Texas if you guys don't know, coming into the city, they cross the border and they spend cash in the red light district there. God, we love a border town here, and there's no better border town than the one where a country with super strict laws meets a country where no one gives a damn. And that, was the U.S. during Prohibition, the one with super strict laws, and Mexico, where no one gave a damn. So you've got Prohibition and Puritans 1 mile away, and brothels and booze just 1 mile the other way. So you can only imagine how much business picks up. And it reminds me of like the Ethiopian border towns near Sudan. And let me tell you, that is what you'd call coming from like, a place where it's basically Sharia law or close to it into a place where it's somewhat lawless. And they are wild spots.
Yeah, I remember a story about the Burmese Chinese border from a guy I met in Yangon that was pretty insane. But is there a good party scene on the Ethiopia Sudan border? Have you been there?
I have been there. If you want to get in some cot and like chew it in a house with a mud floor, or like some of the saddest I wouldn't say party scene, but I would say it's lawless.
It's a place to lose yourself.
That is a place to lose yourself, or it's depressing. Definitely.
Okay.
But
cool. All right.
but there's
I won't go
comments
there for
there.
my holidays.
So it's dusty and small, this town. And then it starts picking up during Prohibition. And then we have heroin post-Prohibition, which had come to Mexico with Chinese migrant workers and then flourished as a crop in Sinaloa. And then post-Prohibition, Mexican criminal groups sort of ride and chased out the Chinese to take over control of those crops. Now, Pablo Acosta is a product of this region, right? He's from a peasant family in the northeast of the state of Chihuahua, one of the places where you wonder why anyone settled there in the first place. It just doesn't seem like it's meant to provide life for human beings. His family are sort of traveling itinerant farmers who wander around the border region looking for work. His grandfather, Lucas, is born in West Texas in 1888, one of 26 kids, and he ends up working mercury mines on the U.S. side of the border, and has a son, Cornelio, in 1906, who's one of 10 kids. Lucas eventually settles on some farmland in the middle of nowhere, near a spring. He has some goats and cows, has 10 kids himself. He made money selling mesquite wood across the border in Texas and also did some petty smuggling. During Prohibition, he smuggled sotol, which is a lesser known sort of cactus booze from the region, into West Texas. But that whole area is like kind of super fluid. I don't even know when it becomes the proper border defining line. I guess I should know that as an American. But it's really fluid. People just move back and forth across. There's not really anything really stopping you. After Prohibition ends, he harvests some sort of wax from plants in the desert, which it was weirdly illegal to smuggle it out of Mexico, where Americans would pay twice as much as Mexicans did. And he brought his son Cornelio. I keep wanting to say Cornholio, dude, but it's not Cornholio. It is Cornelio. That might be dating myself a little bit. But dude, when Cornholio hit, it was like,
yeah,
it blew a lot of minds, man.
It was.
If you were like 13 and that came out, you were like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
It really.
I don't know if you had that
really was
in London. Dude, just a game changer.
We
man.
didn't make any sense at school.
No, it was incredible. Anyway, where was
Top
I?
references. We are young.
Cornelio, his son, is there. They spend a week or two harvesting, avoiding Mexican agricultural police agents, then bring it through the desert into the U.S. to sell. Lucas, he knows the desert mountains super well, and he teaches his son that. And it was legit dangerous. The Mexican agents didn't mess around. It's the kind of thing where you're taking donkeys through the desert canyons at night and occasionally getting into gunfights with them. In January of 1937, he has a son he names Pablo Acosta, who grows up dirt poor in a literal dirt floor shack. Eventually, the family moves to a communal farm in former military barracks that the Mexican government was kind of setting up then, and his dad would go to the States for months at a time to work the fields there. Like I said, the border is basically a porous, fluid thing then. Eventually, the family moves to the States. They're between sort of New Mexico and West Texas. And in 1958, Pablo's dad is murdered outside a bar by a man that Pablo's clan had a blood feud with. And it actually sounds super similar to the way Albanian honor kind of blood feuds worked. Someone killed someone a while ago, and now the clans fight each other over it, and any man is basically a target. Pablo's actually with his dad when he dies. They're at a bar together. His dad steps outside. When he's called out there, he's shot. Pablo hears the gunshot and runs outside to see his dad bleeding out. And that is what we call an origin story right there.
Yeah, that's Nayfeld worthy. That's up there. I actually covered Albanian blood feuds. Crazy stuff up in the north near Shkodra, which is beautiful place full of mountains and stuff. It was this steaming hot day. I think it was like 30 degrees, and the guy gave me a bottle of what I thought was water out of a plastic bottle. So I just necked it, and it turned out it was homebrewed raki, like 80 proof. And the weather wasn't the only thing steaming that day, Danny. I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, if people knew how many assignments just end up with you getting drunk by accident, and not just you, I mean, though you a lot. I mean, like journalist in in general. But yeah, I think we talked about the Albanian blood feuds and honor code quite a bit in a bunch of the earlier Albanian episodes we did like 4 or 5 years ago. But I remember there being an article in the Times, I think in the 90s, about someone whose job it was to like rectify them, who ended up coming to the States, like in the Bronx, where a lot of Albanians had settled in the 80s
Oh,
and
that's
90s,
cool.
and like working to get people over them, which I think is fascinating job,
Yeah.
conflict resolution and whatnot in that regard. So Pablo's in his 20s then. He has a 4th grade education, has been in some trouble with drunk driving, fighting, all stuff like that. He works on farms or in cotton gins, and he's quiet, but he loves to get drunk and scrap. One of his arrests, the police report says, quote, subject threw a pitcher of beer through a plate glass window at the steakhouse bar, which, you guess it, sounds a lot like something a young Sean Williams was doing when his club played Millwall or he was hanging out in Berlin.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. You got your references right.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you mention you hate Millwall enough that I finally have picked up on it, In 1964, he gets approved as a U.S. citizen, and that same year, he graduates from drunken bar fights to drunken gunfights, which he does in a bar over a woman. He gets charged with assault with a deadly weapon, gets it reduced, and does 90 days in county for illegal use of a firearm. Shortly after, he gets married and settles in Odessa, West Texas, which is Friday Night Lights, baby.
Yep.
West Texas forever. He gets a job in construction. It's an oil boomtown, and he falls in with some coworkers from Ojinaga who have a little side hustle going. And no, it is not drop shipping or selling courses. They are smuggling small amounts of that sweet, sweet Mexican black tar heroin across the border.
We do love drop shipping and online courses though, right? Because we need that money too.
I think the drop shipping craze is over, but I think the course thing is still. I mean, I've thought about doing like a course, like a media course, but it'll actually be valuable, and I wouldn't be telling you to commit like tax fraud or that you're going to make $1 million in some business selling, I don't know, houses that you buy foreclosed. I would just be like, you're not going to make any money doing this, but if you want to learn, I will teach you for money.
I mean, you could do. I mean, it can be both.
You're not gonna be like, yeah, I'm on board too. On May 28th, 1968, he makes his first attempt at living that life and is immediately caught after a tip-off, which is embarrassing for a guy who becomes a drug lord. 31 years old, caught, convicted, sentenced to 8 years. He ends up serving 5. But again, Sean, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get up. And success, it's not a diagonal line, Sean. It's not an L. It's a lesson. Does he throw in the towel and give up on his dreams? Of course not. Instead, he networks in prison like all winners do.
Yeah, I think you should do a course. I'm getting convinced.
I mean, that was my practice route right there.
Yeah.
So he, like me and Sean, is charming and funny and good looking then and fearless, and he makes all sorts of new friends and new contacts in prison, guys who have connections in the game on both sides of the border. One of those guys is named Shorty Lopez, which is just a sweet name, like quintessential low-level drug trafficker name, He's a heroin dealer in Odessa. They both get out around the same time, and Pablo decides no more smuggling it across the border. He's going to use his boy Shorty Lopez, who has set up shop in Ojinaga, to get the heroin and weed across, and then he's just going to worry about distribution in the U.S. Now, the drug scene in Ojinaga is evolving in the early 70s. The dominant smuggler at the time Pablo goes inside jail is a guy named Domingo Aranda. And he's like a lot of these early smugglers, right? Especially the guys who were doing that kind of cross-border stuff. He doesn't start out in narcotics or even booze, but regular commercial goods like coffee, sugar, stuff that was being rationed in the US during World War II. Smuggling is not just for illegal goods, right? It's for any good that is cheaper on one side than on the other. But yeah, he does get into heroin eventually because profits. And it's mostly sold to Mexicans or Mexican-American dealers in the US. Then the 60s comes, counterculture explodes, as does the market for weed, and he switches to weed. Ojinaga in 1970 is a dusty town of 10,000 people. It's struggling. Aranda's smuggling business is family-run. Cousins and brothers and in-laws, they're all making money. But his reign on the top ends in the early 70s when he's murdered and his body is torched, allegedly at the hands of a guy named Manuel Carrasco, who was one of his runners, who is also nicknamed the Snake for obvious reasons, and he takes over the whole region. The murder actually shocks Ojinaga, which just isn't used to that level of violence at the time. I think Murderers generally, they are probably used to a little bit, but not like, setting a body on fire. Carrasco, he's got bigger plans. He pays off the local military and police, who he befriends, and he really starts taking over. He's sort of like the next evolutionary point in the drug lord chart, right? The first guy who realizes you really need to work with law enforcement and the government. And Shorty Lopez, he works for Carrasco, and Pablo starts buying weed and heroin from both of them.
Yeah, this is the story of so many guys who got rich, right? Figuring out that you can just bribe or work with the authorities rather than working against them. And that's going to be the same story with the guy in Vietnam that we're going to do next week. And the thing about that is that the fall from grace tends to be way more spectacular, which makes for very good podcasts.
Yeah, it does. I'm excited about that, actually. The Vietnam stuff is fascinating.
Yeah, super, super interesting.
Guys, you know me. I'm a man of elegance and taste and luxury, but I don't want to spend $300 on every single article of clothing, especially fall, new season, new wardrobe, got to refresh things. That's where our newest advertiser, Quince, comes in. I mean, look at this sweater. It's Mongolian cashmere. It feels like butter, and it only costs $60. Even before they were an advertiser, I was buying the Quince linen shirts over the summer because they just felt great. And now that it's fall, they've got all your fashion needs. We're talking sweaters, jackets, hoodies, denim, leather, warm, durable, built to last, and they cut out the middleman, so it's high quality but super affordable. Layer up this fall with pieces that feel as good as they look. Go to quince.com/underworld for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/underworld. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/underworld. Pablo's working actually as a roofer during this time, popping up a little on the radar of cops as he's moving like a key of heroin at a time. In November of 1976, though, he gets caught up after setting up a deal with a guy who had been under surveillance, and inadvertently the cops sort of get onto him, right? They're making an exchange that's in the desert. Two of the buyers then spring out guns. They call out that they're New Mexico State Police, and their backup starts flying in a van. Pablo sprints into the desert as it's already getting dark and he thinks he can get away. He somehow manages to escape and hightails it to Mexico after hiding in a drain pipe and covering it with tumbleweeds. The cops, though, they know who he is, and he knows that if he gets caught in the States now, he's going to do a long bid. It's 1976 now. Pablo is in Mexico for good, and there's opportunity to be had in Ojinaga. Carrasco, the current boss of the area, he's on the run, right? There's some crazy shootout at a hospital. He actually shoots and kills a guy he was partying with and working with who was from another sort of cartel. And I'm saying cartel really, but these are like sort of small trafficking organizations. They probably have like 20, 30 guys. So like when you think cartel, when I'm saying this, don't think like, Sinaloa or CJ&G, right? These are much smaller operations. So after he kills this guy, after they both get into a shootout with the police, it's a weird situation, but Carrasco seemingly does it because he owes the guy a debt. He blames it on the cops, gets found out, gets a price put on his head, and flees. And Pablo's buddy, Shorty Lopez, he takes over that top spot. He, in turn, puts Pablo to work as a bodyguard and driver. It is actually funny, too, how much of these guys start as drivers, Pablo is allowed to still kind of do his own deals in the U.S., just as long as Shorty gets his Plaza boss cut. So Plaza, right? The way the Plaza works, and Plaza's territory, right? Center of the town, whatever, it's generally what people say when they say Plaza. You guys know this. But the way the Plaza works there is the various territories have people you need to pay off to be in control, like authorities, police, politicians, the military. So who is running the Plaza doesn't always mean the drug trafficker or cartel, though it means that too. It also means who gets the payoff. As Papa writes, quote, traffickers like Pablo Acosta operated under a system that was almost like a franchise. They had to pay a monthly fee to their handlers, police or government, for the right to work a specific zone. It was a form of private taxation based on the volume of sales, with the money going to people in power.
I guess this is like getting to the heart of why Latin American crime is so violent in a way, right? Like there's the machismo thing as well, but like if you're working on this plaza system, how are you supposed to keep it or hold it down if you're basically franchising it out or renting it out to incredibly venal, dangerous men with a lot of guns, right? That's like a recipe for constant conflict. I don't know. Is that one of the reasons? It's like it's crazy how it's so
I
much
don't
more violent than in Asia, for example.
I don't think that's necessarily it for why it's so violent. I mean, everywhere people fight over territory for drugs, right? I don't know. I mean, it's the amount of money, the power vacuum, the lack of police, the corruption of the forces.
Yeah, the corruption
And
for
I mean,
sure.
they're just like look, these were in border areas and it obviously ramps up the longer it continues. And I think, a lot of these areas are like border areas that were Wild West that had like a culture already of like using violence to solve. It's no different than I think the American West was, but probably like 100 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like my next episode, State Line Mob in like the 40s and 50s. But I think that because it's continued so long, it ramps up. You've always gotta, I don't know if impress is the right word, but you've got to one up the person that you're competing with, and the violence and you can kind of see in this episode how the violence starts ratcheting up, and in general, like things that weren't done get done, then the next guy has to do it, and the next guy has to do it. But it's an interesting question of what exactly leads to like these insane levels of violence, and I think the money is definitely a big part of it for sure.
Yeah.
Pablo opens up a restaurant and a clothing shop. He also deals in stolen cars from America. He starts really training with a pistol. He loves to fake draw on his friends, which I'm sure they really enjoy, which is like, good one, Pablo, pulling your gun on me again for the 6th time today. Hilarious stuff, funnier because you're wasted and it's definitely loaded. Just not a nice thing to do to your friends, Pablo. It's the era, though, of old school simple deals. People from as far away as like North Carolina or Montana, they'd go to the riverbank on the U.S. side, they'd yell across to a Mexican, strike up a deal, then come across and get it. Big Bend doesn't have a ton of patrols, and weed use is growing enormously, and it's a simpler time, but things change quick on the border. Carrasco shows up, he's back, and he's pissed that Shorty has taken his spot even though he had fled. He lays an ambush for him, Shorty actually gets tipped off, but decides he's going to go through it anyway and gets killed. Maybe that's why the violence is so bad there, because guys are like, oh, there's an ambush, I'm going to go through it anyway.
Yeah.
They're not thinking with their heads. In a grisly foreshadowing of the decades to come, one of the killers uses a machete to sort of scalp him, like take off the top part of his head and his skull, and they make pendant necklaces of that top part of his skull, which is just cool stuff, guys.
Yeah, like which part of his skull? I mean, I'm trying to imagine this. I'm thinking of like some nice big circle pendant, like some hippie lady would wear in New Mexico. I don't know. Like maybe does that sound good? I feel like this could be a nice little accessory, actually.
It doesn't sound good. It sounds awful.
Oh,
Carrasco
okay.
is sort of out of the picture too right after that at the moment, and there's no big boss in Ojinaga, which means no one's paying off the authorities and no one's controlling the plaza. So the authorities, of course, get to work. They start picking off traffickers left and right because they're not getting their payday. And in 1977, towards the end of the year, Pablo is one of those guys who gets popped. He's sent to jail, I think in Chihuahua City, which is the capital of Chihuahua State, which is where Ojinaga is. And he's actually helped out by a bigger trafficker from the area, from the cold open, Fermin Arevalo. Remember that name, because they're not going to be buds for long. Fermin gets him a lawyer, some cash, he's let go. So now it's 1978, and Ojinaga has a power vacuum. You got to have a boss man to pay off the real boss men, the politicians, the military, the cops. But these guys are all like, these bandit outlaws who don't really know how to do this. They probably don't even own suits. The Ojinaga traffickers, they call a conference. They got to figure this out. They choose a guy to do it, and he literally just heads down to the Chihuahua City sort of area to meet the federal police commander and figure out how much to pay him. The federal police commander eventually sees him, takes him to a dungeon to figure out this deal, tortures him for 3 days, and then asks for $10K a month, which eventually he ups to $35K a month.
You don't hear much about dungeons anymore, do you? It's gone out of fashion.
No.
I like it.
No. The guy goes back in Ojinaga. He warns Pablo and the others, if you think we're bad, like this guy, the federal police commander, what is the DFS, I think is the acronym in Mexico, he's a real psycho. And that's, generally the case. But the deal is struck and Ojinaga is calm and everyone gets along for the next few years. Until that guy gets arrested by the DEA in Vegas and is sentenced to 8 years, and someone else needs to take his place to control the plaza.
So by this point, the guys they are big time. Like they are cartels considered pretty massive by the DEA, right?
I mean, I don't know if they're considered in that era, yes, but compared to what we have now, I mean, no, these guys aren't even moving cocaine yet. So like they've got money. They don't have like, buy a private zoo money or like have guys trained as special forces that go and kill 47 people money.
Yeah.
So like they're big time in that little border region, but I don't think they're big time at all because also coke hasn't hit, Or if it has, it's like tiny amounts. So really, it's not much. Pablo, in the meantime, he's really gotten it together. He's this gregarious, charming guy. People like him. He knows how to talk to folks, especially those with authority. He's also a great businessman, right? He's making money and he knows how to spread it around. He's got small planes he's using to traffic. He's gotten to know the players in Chihuahua City. He's figuring out how to pay off the police and the military. And he takes it one step further than anyone had before. He gets in with these guys so good, he's getting official papers from them, stuff that lets him and his people legally carry guns and badges. He even gets his men officially onto the federal police force. Within no time, he's practically untouchable in that region of Mexico. He does stuff like set it up with the military where he harvests his fields, his wheat fields, and then he lets them come in right after and burn them so then they can kind of show off like they're doing their job. In 1981, though, Pablo, he loses that big plane load of weed that we talked about in the cold open, and a pilot that he has that he really liked. He accidentally runs into the propellers after panicking when cops show up. A bunch of his men are arrested, including his brother. Pablo, of course, thinks it's a tip-off. He blames one of the sons of Fermin Arevalo, that same trafficker that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that is gross, but it also this is starting to sound a bit slapstick, like a Will Ferrell movie or something.
Wile E. Coyote, that kind of vibes.
Yeah. Does he step into a propeller at any point?
Wile E. Coyote?
Yeah, that would have been
I think so.
I'm going to show my son that episode. Jeez.
Yeah. maybe he doesn't. Maybe I just have a bad memory of things. The sons of Arevalo, they kind of stay outside the whole Ojinaga circle. They didn't really deal with the plaza situation. They had their own situation. Their dad, Fermin, gets out in 1979. But when Pablo takes over the plaza, tensions are starting to build. They're not thrilled they've got this young upstart in charge. Then Pablo loses that plane, and then Pablo loses a few more internal weed flights, and he's not really sure, but in 82, he does that deal with one of the sons on a weed load, and he thinks he's ripped off, so he's getting really hyped up. Some of his men, including his top enforcer, who's a real psycho named Marco Dajaro, they spot the brothers in town, and they shoot them up. Pablo will later claim he never gave those orders, but one of the sons is killed and the other survives, and after that, it is war. Marco will eventually earn the nickname the Butcher of Ojinaga, so you can kind of get his vibe from that, His mom was actually a smuggler too. He had been a police officer and bodyguard for a customs official in Sonora who was transferred to Ojinaga in 1976. The official was. Marco goes with him. Pablo puts him on in 1979 as like a gopher, driver, bodyguard, guy who like guards shipments and guards fields. Still, the families are close enough that there's this crazy story where Pablo's wife, she goes to the funeral of the son that's killed, thinking there's no way her husband was involved, which is, it's vicious, the game, just vicious. 2 months later, Pablo and his top enforcer, Marco, they're ambushed and their truck crashes, but Marco is able to get out of the truck and kill the enemy gunman and injure a few more.
So now we're getting that crazy violence starting to ramp up. Like, I would be interested if anyone's got any ideas on this, like why this world is like ultra violent even compared to the rest of the world. Just email us. I'd actually like to know. I bet some people have got some interesting ideas about it.
Yeah, for sure. Pablo is he's furious at this, obviously, that he's been ambushed and set up. He gets patched up in a hospital. He was grazed in the head and rounds up his gunmen to go barge into the other hospitals looking for the injured sicarios, even using their federal police badges to do it. He's trying to find out who for sure ordered it, even though he kind of already knows. They end up kidnapping one of the guys they find. They take him out to the desert where he confirms that the Arevalos paid him $500 to try to kill Pablo. Of course, they kill the guy and they dump his body in the desert. And the war is building. Both men are recruiting. They're recruiting soldiers. Within a month, there's another shootout. Interestingly, a state police commander is with the Arevalo men when they're ambushed. And later, he'll try to arrest some of Pablo's men, but he's blocked because the federal police prevent him from doing so. So everyone's got their law enforcement guys that they're paying off, but Pablo's one-upped them because he's got the federales, not just the state police. Within a few months, Pablo's brother and his bodyguard are gunned down at a dance, And during this 3-year war, at least 26 people are killed, which, this sounds crazy to us, but what's also crazy is that that's basically like a week or even like 2 days right now in the current cartel war. Maybe even 1 day. Eventually, we get that scene from the cold open, the showdown, the kidnapping, all that. And Pablo comes out victorious, and he's now officially El Padrino, the Godfather. He's got soldiers protecting his wheat field, not like his soldiers, like actual Mexican military soldiers are protecting his wheat fields and shipments. He's slipping 1,000 peso notes to the beggars and shoeshine boys in town. He's lending out money to the poor he never expects to get back. He pays for medications, hospital visits, gives out water pumps and irrigation supplies to the local farmers. He's winning people over to his side. He builds bridges, figuratively and actually literally. He supports the sports teams. I mean, you guys know the playbook at this point. Says a young man in town to Terrence Papa, quote, "If anyone ran this town, it was Pablo. He was the one who told the military." Says a young man in town to Terrence Papa, quote, "If anyone ran this town, it was Pablo. He was the one who told the military and the police what to do. If someone stole some weed from him, all he had to do was call the military and the police, and they would keep looking until they found it." So he has this aura of like invincibility. His name is spreading as one of the top traffickers in the region, and soon enough, he'll be the top boss of this 200-mile stretch of borderland. And his heroin is super pure at the time, like 93%. It's mostly coming across the border by land, some of it in small planes. One big smuggling method he perfects is hiding drugs in the propane tanks of trucks, which is apparently something because of the gas crisis with the Arab embargo in the 70s. Some cars had fitted their engines to take propane with like tanks in the pickup bed, which is crazy in my mind. So they find a way to stash drugs in them, which for back then was like revolutionary.
Yeah, big Zeppelin vibes. Butterfly flaps its wings in Algiers and we're ending up in like Latin America. It's crazy.
Yeah. Pablo's also dealing in stolen American cars, mostly trucks, and trading drugs for guns that come across the border from the US. And he has a major pot growing operation, contracting out to indigenous farmers to grow crops alongside the Conchos River in Chihuahua. By 1986, it's estimated he has 500 associates working for him just in the US. It's very fluid though. Most people only know their direct higher up, and most of the people he surrounds himself with are either family or longtime blood related. Or I guess longtime blood related is family, but I think they mean longtime people he did business with. He's got full networks in Texas and New Mexico. People from as far away as Michigan and North Carolina, they come down for his weed. Americans always come down to Ojinaga during harvest season. The buyers line up in these hotels to deal with Pablo, and he likes to scare them by showing up with half a dozen gunmen, sort of acting like badasses with cowboy hats and the shotgun shells, bandoliers across their chests, which is a funny thing to do. I think that's great. Good for you, Pablo. Play the role, With all those people in the US, though, Pablo occasionally has some issues, and there's a number of murders stateside involving heroin dealers who hadn't paid up. Marco is the one thought to have been the guy behind them. In fact, by the mid-'80s, Marco actually has to disappear for a while, allegedly because he was killing too many people, and it's said that he actually went down to Mexico City to work as a federal police officer.
Wait, what?
It's amazing how many guys not just got started as police officers, but then would go work as a police officer in the midst of working for the cartels during this time. It's pretty crazy stuff.
Insane.
A couple of other big things happen in the mid-'80s too. The first is Pablo starts doing a lot of coke and then smoking crack, which is generally a bad idea. He's especially fond of the crack-laced cigarette, like you guessed it, a young Sean Williams gallivanting around the plazas of Berlin. I'm just kidding. I don't think Sean regularly smoked crack-laced cigarettes.
No, and it was Bratislava when that happened anyway. But do go on.
But yeah, Pablo is smoking crack, staying up all night, dealing with all the crazy logistics, getting stuff to the border, getting stuff across the border, planes, cars, trucks, getting the money, dealing with the political playoffs, the authorities, all that. It is a lot. Being a drug lord, I know it looks fun. It is not fun. It's
so many
managing the most stressful business ever. So it really is so many spreadsheets, dude. It's not like the glory is very short-lived, and it's a lot of business. Even with all the crack-laced cigarettes and mariachi bands playing at your beck and call. And Pablo is starting to show signs of wear and tear. In 1985, That's going to be time for another big headache because that's when the cocaine starts coming in big time and it's more money, more problems. Hundreds and hundreds of pounds. The crackdown on the South Florida route is in high gear with a myriad of federal agencies taking aim at Miami and the Caribbean. We got the South Florida Task Force that's created in 1982. And within a few years, they're really seeing results. Now, coke had been coming across the Mexican border since the 70s, but it was really small scale. But with all the feds concentrating on shutting down Miami and South Florida, the Colombians start eyeing Mexico. We're not exactly sure how Pablo connected with the Colombians, but it was likely through none other than Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, who shows up around that time to sort of like apprentice or intern with Pablo. It's a wonder, actually, it wasn't happening before, and that they chose the Caribbean in the first place, considering how wide open the border was then, and how much commercial traffic moved across it. But I mean, my guess for why would be the Mexicans already had their network there. The Colombians didn't have the all the power, and working with the Mexican traffickers already controlling the area would involve giving up that power and profits that they just didn't want to at the time. Amado, for those who have never listened, his uncle ran the Guadalajara cartel, and he was sent to learn under Pablo and likely open up new cocaine routes because his uncle was connected to the Colombians already.
Yeah, and listen to our recent show about Cuba and the Castros too, because that has a lot of stuff around the routes for cocaine heading through the Caribbean back around, well, pretty much bang on this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's the way it all moves. There's so many stories from the 80s, both in South Florida. All this is crazy stuff. By late 84, early 85, planes directly from Colombia are landing and dropping off loads in Ojinaga, and the product is being stored at ranches all over. It's not all for Pablo. He's storing it for other big-time traffickers who are sometimes paying him $1,000 a key just to hold it. But he is, of course, also trafficking some himself and getting those plaza taxes. That's the other thing about cocaine, right? Weed will go bad. Cocaine you can store for a lot longer. Soon enough, Pablo himself is meeting with the Medellin cartel higher up Carlos Leder, and there's 5, maybe 6 tons of coke passing through Ojinaga every month. Ojinaga is about to become arguably the biggest cocaine depot in all of Mexico at the time. And the authorities, they catch on to that sooner rather than later. In July of 85, a 19-year-old kid driving a truck pulls into a desolate U.S. border checkpoint north of El Paso, the white sands, tumbleweed, the kind of place the Roadrunner is always running around.
It's the Roadrunner again.
Clipped by propellers. Yeah. Dude, those cartoons, I kind of want to start watching the Roadrunner again, man. A lot going on there.
You're so young. I mean, Wile E. Coyote, Cornholio, all these reference, man. We Gen Z.
Golden era. That stop. It's not really set up for drug traffickers, right? They're more trying to get people on driving violations, expired licenses, drunk driver, like that whole thing. The cop working it, though, he notices the propane tank in the back is a little funky. The valve is shut tight, and it usually works better if it's open. He had just put one on his own truck, and he asked the kid what he's running, and the kid says he's running propane, but the cop notices that the truck's dashboard indicates it's on gasoline. The kid is polite, but he doesn't have a driver's license or registration, and the cops kind of keep expecting that weird propane tank, and they're suspicious. One of the police there with them had heard a story about weed being hidden in propane tanks. So they take the kid in the car to a nearby auto mechanic. When they finally get it open, there is cocaine.
This is like word for word a scene out of a Cormac McCarthy novel. It's amazing.
Yeah. There is a lot of it. For back then, 246 pounds. The book says it's worth $50 million, but if you actually look at cocaine rates, it's probably closer to $5 million, unless coke places were insanely inflated back then. They keep digging into the suspect. They discover another shipment of 263 pounds of cocaine hidden outside his El Paso apartment in a truck that's parked outside there. And at the time, these are record-setting seizures, and no one fully grasps the scale of the smuggling problem along the Mexico border. Then a call comes in from Los Angeles. Authorities there have just made a record-breaking seizure of 556 pounds in May, and there are striking similarities between the two cases, including that it's a truck with a Texas license plate.
Yeah, this is crazy, man. I guess the mid-'80s always seen as this high tide for coke in the US, but is it just because it was relatively new? Because, I guess these busts they're big, right? I mean, they're not small, but by today's standards, It just shows how huge the busts are now.
Yeah, I think in Miami it was quite big, but it's definitely not the biggest ever, correct? I think Toby Muse has even talked about how Colombia is growing more than ever at this time. So yeah, I think record breaking for back then, and the violence was also, everything was new then, including the violence in Miami, which actually was probably worse than it's ever been in Miami. Yeah, so I think it was massive, but it doesn't come close to what it is right now, you know? By then, cocaine is already moving through Sinaloa, through Baja into California, but the truck confiscated in Los Angeles, like I said, has Texas plates. The El Paso team digs deeper and begins finding connections along with several local businesses that were on the take, including a mechanic who modified the propane tanks used for hiding the drugs. What emerges is a sophisticated smuggling network rooted in the El Paso area, and all the threads ultimately lead back to one man, Pablo Acosta. The implications, though, are clear. This is the new route. El Paso is the new Miami.
I am always saying this.
The few DEA agents on the case start to get overwhelmed as they uncover more and more about Acosta's organization, and they form a task force. They're uncovering hundreds of people working for or connected to Acosta all around them. By February of 1986, they've convened pretty much every federal agency there is in the region: DEA, FBI, Customs, INS, IRS, U.S. Attorney, El Paso Police Department, and they run through how big the operation is, the 500 associates, the guns, the murders, the drugs, and end with, quote, current intelligence indicates that numerous public officials throughout West Texas, which include sheriff deputies, local police officers, state and local prosecutors, and other elected and appointed officials, are associates of the Acosta organization. Meanwhile, Pablo is having issues on his side of the border. In late January 86, as all this is happening, around midnight one night, Pablo and his nephew and another member of his organization are at a stoplight in Ojinaga. They're ambushed by a dozen or so gunmen who spring out of a group of cars and start just firing. But he's saved randomly by two civilians who accidentally drive through the street right when the Sicarios start unloading their weapons. They're killed instantly, but Pablo and his men get cover and they run into a convenience store market, which the men then spray with more automatic gunfire. Some of Pablo's guys, though, they show up, and there is a firefight. You know, you ever seen Boondock Saints, William Dafoe?
Oh man, I always miss that, and like the people who are really into it. There were so many people who were deeply into it at uni that kept watching it all over and over again. Yeah. I never saw it. No,
it's terrible, but also incredible. William Dafoe in his weirdest role that you've ever seen. Pablo's guys are outnumbered, but they're battle tested, right? And the Sicarios are young and experienced guys. There are gunfights all over town. There's running battles, chases. It lasts hours. Pablo's guys, though, they come out on top. There's bodies everywhere. The next day, soldiers show up and surround Pablo's house. But they're not there to arrest him. They're there to protect him. Pablo blames the Arevalo family, immediately the one son who survived. He's paranoid. He's crazy at this point, like I said, smoking a lot of crack. He starts kidnapping civilians who were just there at the shooting as random witnesses. He's showing up at their houses at 3 a.m., just trying to get a story of what happened. He's torturing them to get answers. You know, on the one hand, like I said, a lot of crack, paranoia, goes with the territory. But on the other hand, this is like the 9th time someone tries to kill him. So I kind of feel like some paranoia might be warranted. You know, maybe it's not just the crack speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish someone would kill him at this point.
Now, as all this is going on, there's actually a U.S. customs agent focused on narcotics that's been secretly meeting with Pablo in Mexico, hoping to turn him into an informant. His name is David Reguela. He is a badass. He's a storied past. He had been in an infamous gunfight with smugglers called the San Vicente Shootout and had already arrested Pablo's uncle and one of his younger brothers. Anyway, around that same time as the cocaine flights are starting to come in, he's connected to Pablo through a woman named Mimi Webb Miller, the niece of a U.S. senator who has a gigantic ranch next to Pablo in Mexico. She's an artist who loves Mexican culture. She falls in love with like the border area, sets up shop there and marries like this outlaw type. Pablo's friendly with the guy. They had some business together, and he actually helps her set up a horseback tours for tourists. And Pablo and his boys, they soon start using her ranch like a spa or like a B&B. Eventually, her husband's heroin addiction gets to be too much. They break up, and she starts dating this guy, David Reguela, the agent. They, ride horses, they raft in the river. It actually sounds quite idyllic. Pablo actually finds out about it, and he knows this guy is the Fed who sent his family members away. He confronts Mimi, and she somehow talks him down, tells him she hasn't been giving up any info, that this guy's okay. And somehow Pablo is cool with this, which is, the whole thing is insane that he would be cool with this. She must have been extremely charming and attractive. A few months later, he actually asked her to set up a meet with the guy.
Yeah, is Mimi Miller actually the true hero of the story? This is the I guess the intelligent play?
I don't know. I mean, why?
Oh, I mean, she's managed to somehow not get killed and inform, and I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll see what happens. But no, they eventually meet up and grow to like each other, exchanging their war stories, drinking brandy, all that. Pablo tells him he has nothing to do with cocaine, which is a lie, and asks what happened with his younger brother and uncle. Regella, he finally asks Pablo, like, why not work together? You have rivals, dealers you probably want out of the picture. Feed me info. This is a classic thing that U.S. authorities have done with, or Mexican authorities too, with cartel guys. But I guess this was early on in that era. Pablo says he'll think about it, and with that, they sort of break off. They keep meeting like every month or so for the next year or two. Pablo never really gives up anything worthwhile at first, but Regella thinks maybe he just wants to leave the door open to eventually turn himself in and cooperate, like so many future drug lords have. Then, in early 86, right, we have that shootout and ambush. Pablo, he asks Regella to go after the Aravalos for trafficking heroin, because he, of course, suspects they're the ones who try to kill him. He starts informing, but his tips are just kind of bad or late. At one point, they decide to work with one of Regella's informants. Pablo's going to help him sort of figure out how to start buying their heroin, sort of get him in the scene, and eventually convince the son, who is still alive, whose name is Lupe, to come to the US for a big deal so Regella can bag him. Meanwhile, Pablo is super strung out, right? He's just inhaling blow at this point, not sleeping, staying up for days at a time and smoking crack or snorting blow to keep him running his business on that little sleep. It's kind of just like the early days of the Underworld podcast.
Yeah. Oh, the good old days. Actually, I can't take back what I said about Mimi Miller. We're actually the real heroes here. I can't believe we get all these 45-minute podcasts done week after week just for you guys.
It gets to the point where friends are sometimes injecting him with tranquilizers so he stays asleep. Finally, he heads to Cancun for a few months to detox, to relax, to get away from the blow at the border. I mean, I guess Cancun wasn't Cancun yet in the mid-'80s, and Tulum, like, forget about it. I get not even like a single sound healer had set up shop. Pablo stays for 2 months. He sometimes pretends to be a bellhop to practice English with tourists, which is hilarious. By April of that year, he's hitting the papers, though, as being a huge trafficker. It's the first time his name has been seen in newspapers since the 1960s, and that is a bad sign. He's clean for a bit after getting back from Cancun, but soon enough, he's using again, more paranoid than ever, desperate to kill off the Aravellos. He's always on the move, never sleeping in the same place twice, switching cars, only surrounded by blood relatives.
Yeah, you're right. This actually is like the early days of the pod.
Yeah. In summer of 86, Pablo starts to tell Regella that he wants the Colombians out of Ojinaga. Pablo finally admits he was helping with warehousing and smuggling that he helped the Colombians set up shop in Ojinaga and was making a ton of cash, but feared they were taking over and bringing too much heat from the US. He wants them out. The Colombians, for their part, they're making life tougher for all the dime store traffickers Pablo works with. The guys who would mule small amounts of weed and heroin across the river and the border, because all the heat the Colombians had brought with them. Now there's a lot more American patrols, and those like small-time traffickers, they're getting pissed at Pablo because he brought all these Colombians in and kind of ruined their livelihood. Pablo wants to go back to the old ways, but you can't, Pablo. You just can't. Like, time is an unstoppable force. There's nothing we can do. It just keeps moving, oblivious to the wills and desires of man, and we must accept this, or it will drive us mad. Where was I? All right. Pablo then, as if his life isn't complicated enough, he starts a relationship with Mimi Weber after her and Regella had broken up, this is a wild-ass love triangle, though it's supposedly amicable. Honestly, this must have been like some woman, like a young Dolly Parton, or maybe even Jolene, dude. Maybe this is who Jolene was. Regella is worried about Mimi, though. He warns her that Pablo has quite a few people that want him dead, which obviously, but she's like, doing the wounded bird thing. She wants to save him, thinks she can turn him around like a 33-year-old woman in Brooklyn dating a skateboarder with a neck tattoo, which, ladies, it's just like, it's not going to work. You can't. You can't. She also doesn't know too much of his dark side, according to the author of the book, but I mean, come on. Like, she definitely did. She's in the border town. She has to know these guys are killing people left and right. Now, her brilliant idea is to get Pablo some positive press. So she introduces him to a few journos and gets a few small articles printed. But in October of 86, a journalist from the El Paso paper reaches out to Mimi to meet Pablo. He's warned by friends not to do the interview. Pablo's warned not to do the interview. But Mimi thinks he can tell his side and come out looking good. She thinks everyone's going to fall for him like she did, which is a bad move. Pablo has a reporter come meet him. He's got like guns everywhere, like, the pistolero that he is. He's telling him he's killed people, but it's always in self-defense. He tells the guy that the border is full of insane rumors and not to believe them. He confesses to being a drug trafficker, but he says it's only weed. The reporter asks him about the 26 murders he's accused of, and he goes through the list and actually claims responsibility for a bunch. But he says, of course, they're all self-defense. He talks about the war with the Aravalos. He downplays how big his organization is. He says the DEA is recklessly exaggerating, which, they do sometimes. So fair play on that one. He also shows the reporter how he makes crack and then laces a cigarette and smokes it after claiming the only cocaine he ever had is for personal use.
Do you reckon the journalist did the crack in the cigarette? Because I reckon he did.
I reckon he did and just didn't say anything because, like, come on. I mean, we've all been there. But it actually reminds me of there's that New Yorker article from a way back with Gil Scott-Heron, right, where he's like smoking crack in front of the author, and it's super depressing.
Oh no, I haven't read that one. No, I don't know it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a wild one. So yeah, Pablo's doing the whole Robin Hood thing. He's talking about how he gives away 95% of his money. He helps the sick and the poor. He even takes the reporter to see a girl who's like surgery he paid for on her eyes in a hospital. Oh, and he admits to paying off the federal police, but pretends it's not organized or like a deal, just money here and there. So one of those details that you're like, probably shouldn't have said that to a reporter afterwards. The reporter spends 24 hours with him, and he gets some good material. Pablo is just like straight up losing it though, right? He's forgetting things. He's being abandoned by friends and allies. Most people start to think the crack and the coke is going to finish him off before the bullets do. He's starting to ask Reguela about surrendering to the U.S., cutting a deal, also offering him $500,000 to kill off Lupe, the Arevalo son. He even asked for a federal prosecutor to come to Mexico to discuss a deal, and as part of the deal, Pablo wants to go to prison in the U.S., not Mexico, which is incredibly ironic considering how things change over the next couple decades. When the stories start coming out, the newspaper stories, with Pablo on the front page and the title The Mexican Godfather, things do not go well for him, especially the parts about him paying off the Mexican federales and having the army protect his wheat fields. There is upheaval in Mexico, to put it lightly. People are fired, officials are replaced, warrants are unearthed, forces are assembled. I think maybe this doesn't happen if he doesn't give up the whole paying off the authorities angle, but who knows? And Narcos Season 2 Mexico, I think, does a really good job of dramatizing all of this stuff. Pablo flees Ojinaga, so do all his close people, including Amado. There's a massive Mexican manhunt underway from late 1986 into 1987. At one point, his nephew gets pinched after he had returned to Ojinaga to score some heroin. He was an addict and is interrogated and beaten to death by the Mexican police. Pablo, though, figuring he would give up his location, slips away. He's now the most wanted man in Mexico at the time, and he's depressed about his nephew's death. He blames himself for what happened.
Yeah, I mean, because it probably was his fault, right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
He starts talking about trying to kill as many Mexican federales as possible, even if it meant he's going to die in a shootout, when before that, he had been thinking he could just bribe his way out. But now he's just like overcome with rage. He goes to hide out in this rural village in a canyon that's like super hard to access unless you're coming in from the American side, from Big Bend across the river. Or I think if you're going to come in from the Mexican side, it's something like you'll be spotted way before you get close. You'll have no element of surprise. So Pablo gets there. He spreads his money around. All the campesinos or peasants are loyal. He recruits all the young men to serve as his protection. He gives them guns and everything. Soon enough, though, U.S. park rangers across the river in Big Bend National Park, they have a good idea Pablo is there. They can see all the action happening. The federales soon learn too from phone taps, but they're wary to go in. There's just, because it's so hard to get into, there's no element of surprise, and they think Pablo would have too much time to flee and fight back. They know they're going to need that element. They managed to strike a deal, though, with the Americans, who are going to let the Mexican commandos helicopter in from their side of the border. On April 24th, Pablo's guys are throwing a small fiesta in the village. They're roasting a calf on the open fire. There's maybe 300 villagers in total living in the entire enclave. And just then, 2 helicopters come through, whirring loudly, and 20 or so commandos rappel down onto rooftops in a nearby field. Pablo's guys are caught completely off guard. The commandos are able to round up a ton of men in the village with no shots fired. After 10 minutes, the village is almost completely secured. Pablo's guys are caught off guard. The commandos are able to round up a ton of men in the village. After 10 minutes, the whole outside is completely secure. Then they start going door to door, searching houses, rounding up all the men. Pablo ends up in one house surrounded with two of his guys and gets into a shootout with the federales. And it takes hours. They try all sorts of stuff like throwing in tear gas and setting the roof on fire. They capture one of the gunmen Pablo's with. The other eventually surrenders. Eventually, they storm in, only to find Pablo already dead on the bed holding a machine gun. His funeral is held a few days later, and some sick narco corridos are written and played for it. And one goes, quote, "Gone is Pablito, friend of the poor, killed by the government in a world that shows no mercy for people like that. And the gringos, laughing on their side of the river, prayed for Pablito to die. Yet he had done nothing more than give them what they wanted." I bet that sounds incredible in Spanish over accordion music, dude.
Yeah, and why haven't you done that?
I don't know. Another, quote, "The Tsar of traffickers is dead. Truly the mafia king. He always won respect in the villages and towns around. Everywhere else he went, even the bravest shook with fear." So the Fox of Ojinaga is dead. A true outlaw bandit. He had the scarred face, the cowboy gear, the gold-lined teeth. He had the bandoliers across his chest, and he represented a transition, a time in the Mexican cartel landscape where things were changing rapidly. I always thought he kind of represented a more peaceful, less brutal era, but it turns out, yeah, but also the bar is super low because he did a whole lot of murdering. Of course, we all know what happens after. Amado Carrillo Fuentes disappears for a while, then shows up back in Ojinaga, and while not in charge at first, eventually grows more powerful than almost anyone in Mexico, becomes Lord of the Skies. The cartel system really emerges in the 90s. Everything is carved up, and we get the Juarez cartel in this area. Later, there's rumors that Amado actually paid the police commander to kill Pablo, but the evidence isn't really there. And Mimi Weber, who was still with Pablo at the time, I think in relationship-wise, not in the village, is informed there's a price on her head because she knows too much. She flees to California. Texas Magazine reports, though, that in the early 2010s, she's back in the area giving horseback tours. So good for her for getting back on that horse. Hi-yo!
Oh, waited over an hour for that. And
Yeah.
I think everyone listening to
Yeah.
this show will agree it was worth every second.
Yeah, come on. What a setup. That was fantastic. If I don't say so myself. It might have been like a Sean joke, but it was also terrific.
Hey, given that people are going to be listening to this a week after the game, what are your predictions for the game 2 of the wild card? Let's just have them so we can laugh back at it.
If the Yankees lose, they need to fire Boone. Steinbrenner would have followed him in the middle of the game yesterday, dude. It was insane. Come on, dude. Why do you take Fried out? Why don't you start? I know why you don't start Jazz, but put Jazz in her. I'm so angry. Patreon.com/Underworld Podcast because I'm going to lose money betting on the Yankees to win the World Series like an idiot. Underworldpod.com. Sign up on Spotify. Support our advertisers. We love you. Sean, you're a great man, and I'm just happy to be here with you. And, it's Yom Kippur in like 5 hours, so I ask your forgiveness, Sean, for wronging you in the podcast.
I'll get back to you.
And I ask... let's just keep going. I ask our listeners forgiveness for wearing sunglasses. I know it makes a lot of you incredibly angry when I do that in the studio. So I ask your forgiveness. And Happy New Year. Love you all. Support the podcast. Good night.
Beautiful.